What is up, you guys? Glitchiz here, and welcome back to the channel. Today I am bringing you my Shroud Hunter build. I'm pretty proud of it. It's actually really fun and a lot more viable than I thought it would be. I had a ton of fun with it, and it definitely blows the warrior build damage-wise out of the water. Warrior is very underpowered right now, and even stands up to the wizard, in my opinion, this particular build that I came up with. Some gimmicks that I found out through my testing that work really well that I'm going to be showing off. I'm not going to be calling it the best hunter build in the world like my warrior guide, simply because if you want to be the best hunter, all you got to do is have patience and craft a ton of explosive arrows and then spec into explosive arrows. But as I'm sure you guys already know, explosive arrows are very time consuming to craft, so I found out the next best thing, which does almost, if not more damage than the explosive arrows when you combo it properly. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. Before I get into the details of the armor and things like that, I do want to mention for the people that don't want to sit here through the lengthy description of the entire build, that down in the descriptions, there's going to be a link for the cheat sheet for the build that I've made using the custom skill tree template. All the skill points that are allocated in the tree will be on that cheat sheet, as well as the entire equipment and weapon loadout down in the bottom right hand corner. So feel free to download that. That same link will also give you access to the cheat sheets for all my other builds. And there will also be timestamps as well. So feel free to skip along through that too if you want. But onto the armor. Let's go into that first. Best in slot, in my opinion, is the Eagle Eye helmet. This will have 33 physical, 33 magical resistance with plus 15% range critical strike chance and plus 13% critical strike damage. Some decent alternatives if you don't have this helmet yet is the Deadeye hood or the Deerstalker hood. These are identical headpieces with identical traits. They just look different, so you have to pick which one you like the look of more. The only other option that I would recommend, and this would go for the gloves option as well, is the Hawk helmet, and that because it gives 15% range critical strike chance and 10% backstabbing damage. And I did test both backstab damage and elemental damage, and unfortunately in the early access neither of those properly affect arrows. I don't know why. Some of the bows have backstab damage on them. I guess it only works for the base damage of the bow itself, but any of the sneak attack like backstab bonus percentage perks don't seem to be giving bows any extra damage, which is a huge bummer. And things like Arsonist and Pyromaniac in this skill tree don't boost the fire magic damage of weapons. It only works for magical weapons, which is really annoying, even though the perk says all fire damage. So you would think that a fire magic damage bow and arrow would get a benefit from that, but for whatever reason it doesn't. And so for that reason, I'm going with the Eagle Eye hood. But if backstab does eventually work, there is another potential build that I'd like to test out in the future if they fix it, that adds a bunch like 40 to 50% extra backstab damage. That could potentially do a lot of damage with the ornate wood bow, but we're not going to be using this as an option because without that working, it's just not worth it. But moving on to the chest piece, I'm using the Radiant Paladin chest piece. This is because I wanted to, like I mentioned in the warrior build, hit that maximum resistance and armor cap. And with the Paladin chest piece and the Paladin trousers, we hit that. So we're taking the maximum resistance, and the enemies are doing the least possible damage they can do to us with still giving us some nice perks. This gives us 240 base health and 24 stamina, which is always nice. Moving on to the gloves, best in slot in my opinion right now is the Eagle Eye gloves. This will give plus 12% range damage. An alternative, if they ever fix it, could potentially be the Deerstalker gloves. This gives 6% flat range damage, but it also has a 12% damage multiplier. So depending on how that damage multiplier works, you could potentially get a little bit more damage out of your shots. But if you watch my warrior video right now, the 12% damage multiplier is not working. So these gloves are pretty much broken right now. They're useless in my opinion. But once they fix that, this could also be a good contender for the gloves. Going on to the pants. Like I mentioned, to get us to that resistance cap and have the best defense, I went with the Radiant Paladin trousers. This gives us plus 2 health regeneration and plus 90 health. Once you hit the cap, the next best thing you want to invest in is your health. And we already have plenty of stamina regen between our consumables, our rings, and our other pieces of equipment. So more armor and more health regen is going to be better in this particular case. So that's why I went with those. And then for the boots, I recommend the Deadeye boots. This gives +3 stamina regen and a -700 stamina regeneration delay. These are very similar to the Hawk boots that I went over in my previous video, which now have the Deadeye boots as the best in slot for this particular reason. That is because they are identical to the Hawk boots. They just have 3 stamina regeneration instead of 2. So these are slightly better, which is why I went with that. And that stamina regeneration delay is amazing. We're going to be burning through stamina a lot with this build, specifically because of some of the skills that we're picking. Moving on to the rings, I'm running 1 ring of opacity. The ring of opacity, basically, we have a very small mana pool. So the +20 mana regen gives us enough to do the infinite gliding glitch when it comes to using our glider, which we will be doing a lot because unlike the wizard, we have to farm the materials for our ammunition. So this will come in handy for our traversing and our gliding usage. And then lastly, I use the Ring of Health. This gives +4 health regen and another flat 50 health to our base health pool. If you get really good with the build and you feel like you're not getting hit at all that much, you can potentially swap this out with the Ring of Stamina. And that basically is the same equivalent of this, except instead of health regen and health, you're getting stamina regen and stamina. So another potentially good option there. For the bow, our main go-to bow that we're going to be using is the Ignited bow. This will be our go-to combat bow for close range fights and with groups of enemies when you have multiple foes. The Shadowbane is going to be our life leech bow. So this is how we're going to get our health back. You can also use the melee weapon that I'm going to be recommending for this build to get health back, because we will be stunning enemies like crazy with this build. And you can get, because of the AoE damage, a lot of health back, even with it only being 5% regen. And then last but not least, the third bow, you want to take all 3 of these bows with you when you go out, in my opinion, is the Wolf's Snarl longbow. This is going to be your single target, basically like fight initiator bow, where you know you're going to get that first shot off before the enemy sees you. You can start off the fight with this one because it does have a longer draw speed but a higher base power. So try to get your first shot off with this and then immediately switch to the Ignited bow for the rest of the fight. Or if it's just one enemy, you can sit there and burn them down with the longbow, because that'll be pretty easy. But mainly, we're going to be using the Ignited bow. But moving on to our melee weapon, I still like to run the Sword of Radiance. The increased 25% to crit chance is nice with another perk we're taking in the tree to give us bonus health regen with our melee weapon whenever we critically hit. And you will critically hit all the time with this weapon. So if you, in a rare situation, run out of ammo, or you're just low health and the somewhat medium to slower regen rate of the bow isn't fast enough for what you need in the moment, you can stun them, switch to your sword, and this will regen your health much faster. So that's just an alternate option. Plus, it's always good to just have a melee weapon to break things down, whether it be destructibles in the environment, like doors, pots, things like that. So that's why I take this along. But moving on to ammunition, and this is why I call it the Shoud Hunter build. We are going to primarily be using Shroud arrows. And you're looking at me like I'm crazy, I know, but believe it or not, I did the testing. The Shroud arrow, when an enemy is stunned and caught in the cloud for the full duration of the damage effect, only does 45 to 50 damage less than an exploding arrow, which is insane because the materials that are required to craft a Shroud arrow are only twigs, goo, and a shroud sack. And I will show you all the locations to where to farm these super quick, and you can get Shroud arrows very fast. It takes like 50 minutes plus to create 1 stack of 25 explosive arrows, and we will basically be getting only 45 to 50 damage less than an explosive arrow with our Shroud arrows with the build that we're running. Not only will we do that, but we're also going to be getting infinite stuns on enemies, and they're just 100 times easier to craft in bulk. You can craft them super quick. They don't take iron, they don't take anything. You literally just use twigs and then low tier items that you can find from enemies that you can one-shot. For our enemies inside the Shroud, the one downside, however, to the Shroud arrows is they don't work on enemies in the Shroud. In those scenarios, you're going to be using iron arrows or poison iron arrows. These do basically the exact same damage. to normal enemies, wildlife, and things like that, like the dogs and animals and the Virons, the birds that we're going to be farming for feathers, for example. They do take a little bit more damage with the poison arrows. So for the cost of a little bit of sulfur and some poison sacks, you can convert all of your iron arrows into poison arrows very easily as well, if you're willing to farm 2 extra materials. And honestly, to create our iron arrows, the spot that I'm going to be showing you guys has a sulfur deposit and an iron deposit right next to each other, so you can actually farm both of these required materials to get your poison arrows in the exact same spot. So super handy. As for the poison sacks, a lot of people recommend killing the scorpions in the end game, but in my opinion, there's a way easier way. People have been forgetting that the orange plants in the starter areas also drop poison sacks. So my go-to location for that would be right here along this cliff. You basically just would spawn to the Revelwood Ancient Spire and then come down, and as soon as you hit this area, this whole region right around in here, including around this lush pasture, is going to have like 6 or 7 of those orange plants that you can kill. Every one of those will drop a poison sack. Once you kill those, you can work your way over here, and once you get closer to this area, you're going to run into more mounds that have 3 or plus more of those orange plants, plus those poisonous mushroom enemies. Those have a chance of dropping 2 poisonous sacks per kill, so you can farm them there as well. When you're done doing the lower level, what I recommend is going back to the Ancient Spire and then flying this time, however, to the upper platform, because up here you're going to run into a few more of the orange plants as well, but there's also a ton of beetroot and a crap ton of strawberries that you can gather, which is going to be key ingredients for some of the consumables that we're using. So try and do your poison sack farm and your berry and beetroot farm to get your farm up and running, which I would recommend at the same time, because they're going to be right in the exact same area. Now for the Shroud sacks, that is going to drop from the blue flower enemy plants. They look identical to the orange ones, they're just going to be blue. And the go-to place for those, in my opinion, is going to be right here in Lone Thistle. So again, you can teleport right to the Revelwood Ancient Spire again, glide over. You're going to see a little tiny mini castle tower. If you're standing at the front door of that castle tower, you're actually not in the Shroud. So you can go back to this location to get out and teleport out if you need to, or just back to your menu and go back into the game and you'll teleport to the nearest checkpoint. But basically, right once you're in front of this castle, there's about 3 or 4 of those blue plants there that drop Shroud sacks. Then what I want you to do is start working your way upwards. Once you hit the top half, there's going to be a mound with 3 or 4 more blue plants that you can kill. And then from here, you're going to beeline it to the east, and you're going to head over to the Elixir Well. And then in the Elixir Well, you're going to want to just clear it out, because inside that, you're also going to run into probably 7 or 8 of the blue plants as well, plus a ton of those critters, the bugs. And the bugs will drop the critter dust, and you're going to need for your Shroud arrows the goo, which you craft at the Alchemist, and the goo requires dirt, which you can get from any low-level ground terrain by pickaxing it, bug dust, and Shroud liquid. The bug dust you get from the critters, just kill a bunch of bugs, and that Elixir Well is a really good spot for that. And then the Shroud liquid are those white little capsules that you see on the ground. A good spot to farm them, where you can also get critters at the same time, is actually the OG chest farming location right outside where your initial home base location would be. There's going to be that little tower that everyone used to go to instead of going there for the chest. However, this time, land on the tower and then run to the base of the steps. At the bottom of the steps is a bug spawn. You're going to get like 10 to 15 bug kills there, which will give you a ton of the critter parts. And then along the whole edge perimeter of this cliff line inside the Shroud, you'll find more than enough of the Shroud liquid that you would need, all scattered throughout on the ground over here as well in bulk, that you can get super quick. So between 2 different locations, you can find every single ingredient that you would need to craft all of the Shroud arrows and poison arrows that you would need to make. Now for the iron, the best place that I would recommend for that is my go-to cave passage. You can either set up a mid altar wherever you want, but you can actually get there if you're good at gliding, which will have the bonus stamina with their glider with this build at the Kindleway Spire. fly directly north, you're going to pass a bunch of like higher level terrain, either go over or under the archway, and then right around back, you're going to see a bunch of big fossil bones, which you can actually farm for some fossilized arrows if you really want to. But you're also going to see the entrance to this cave. Inside that cave, you'll find luminous crystal for the light up cubes, sulfur, which we need for our poisonous arrows, and an iron deposit, which has more than enough iron to break 1 or 2 pickaxes worth. So you can just go to this one location and get all of the mining requirements you would need. So make sure to mark that. That is a great location to hit multiple things that you need in one spot. And then last but not least, for twigs, I'm sure you guys have seen videos already. The best place would be those like wolf caves, but the best version of those are the ones that are the full mounds. Shout out to 4am again. I know he mentioned this in his video. I spotted it as well, but I'll give him a little bit of credit. This location right here, spawn right at the Kindleway Spire again, except this time go south. This whole little stretch right here will have a bunch of sand diggers to get some meat for some of our consumables, as well as scorpions, which also do give poisonous sacs as well, but there's only a few of them. But you might as well kill them while you're there. But this whole section right here is just a ton of flying enemies. And between getting this one, and working your way a little bit further down, you can get about 15 to 20 feathers in one run. And that's more than enough to craft several stacks of 50 iron arrows. So really, really good farm there. That's where I would go for your feathers. And then for the twigs, the best spot that I found are these locations right here. Just spawn at the Ancient Spire in the Nomad Highlands, glide down, and you're going to see 2 basically twig mounds that are full 360-degree mounds, not just like inside of a cave. And maybe I'll show a clip here of it. But that spot right there, and then right across the bridge is going to be an identical one. You can farm that 2 pickaxes worth. I would recommend bringing 2 iron pickaxes with you. You'll get more than enough twigs between these 2 locations to get all of your arrows you need there as well. So between the twig spot farm, 1 or 2 runs to get some feathers, your mining for both your sulfur and your iron at the same time, and then your poison sacks. Between those 3 or 4 locations, you can get every ingredient you need, and it's super, super cheap to make it in bulk, unlike the explosive arrows that take like wood acid and all these things at the alchemy table and everything else, and black powder and all this stuff that takes like 4 or 5 ingredients just for those to make one of them at a time, and the just time it takes is forever. So that is the best spots to farm the ammunition, in my opinion. And these are basically the only things you're going to need to make all of those that you need. Moving on to consumables, the quick use ones obviously take the highest level potions you can get. In this case, it's the revitalizing health potion, which gives you plus 800 health instantly. You're going to want to, in an emergency situation, bring some clean bandages. This will give you plus 6% healing per second. Good place to farm these is the Sun Temple, just south of where the legendary farming spot location is that I made a video for. You can put an altar right outside the temple door, and there's 2 or 3 chests that you can farm in this area that drop consumables, experience scrolls, wizard spells, as well as all the destructible pots in here can all drop bandages and stuff as well. So great place right here to farm consumables. So that is where you can get those. You're also going to want to take flasks of the Fel if you have any for 20 additional stamina. And then last but not least, the elixir potion, which will give us a 30% damage multiplier, which is very nice. We're not like wizards. We don't have extra scrolls that we can read, unfortunately. So this is our only go-to potion that will give us some bonus damage. As for best in slot food items, the ones I like to use are the stir-fried vegetables, which give us plus 5 dexterity, the chicken soup for some more constitution, some more health, and as well as another dexterity, the fruit bowl for plus 6 health regeneration and plus 3 stamina recharge, and then lastly, I like to run the chamomile tea for just 2 endurance and some more health regen. You can use some yucca fruits and other things like that that are considered sweets, because we are getting the 2 perks that increase the effectiveness of sweets in our food items in the skill tree, as well as the cake stomach one that allows us to have 4 consumables. So that's why we get to use 4 food items instead of 3. But we'll go over that in a minute. And I guess I can actually show off the farm, which I've never done before. Wanted to have a secret passage always, so I made one behind behind the throne room. But these are basically all the ingredients that you would need for hunter-specific food items. If we go over here, talk to the farmer for dexterity, stir-fried vegetables, needs corn on the cob, forest beets, tomato, and bell pepper. That is why I farmed a couple of them and made a nice little farm spot for bell pepper, tomato, corn on the cob, and the beets. Moving on to the chicken soup. This requires more beets and bell peppers, so very similar. That's why I craft more of those. For whatever reason, the tomatoes, you get less seedlings when you craft tomatoes than you do bell peppers, even though they give you the exact same stats. So when you're making your farms, I do recommend growing more tomatoes than you do bell peppers because they're a little bit harder to get. But that being said, as long as you have anywhere near this amount, you'll have plenty. Moving on to the sweets. I know I mentioned you can use yucca fruits. You'll get an extra 30% bonus because of the perk if you want to use that. And they're super easy to farm. You get these from chopping down the palm trees. They're all over the place, actually in the same spot that you're going to be farming your feathers. So feel free to chop them down there at the same time. And then lastly, the fruit bowl is going to take a combination of honey, which you get from beehives. I have 3 of them in my farm. The yucca fruits, which you can get at the same time, like I just mentioned, as your feathers. And then purple berries and strawberries. And I mentioned that was a good spot to get the strawberries and whatnot on the upper level of the area that we're farming our poison sacks. So you can pick up those at the same time and have those ready to grow. Actually, I don't even bother growing them because you get so many of them from that spot that you can just use them to craft as needed because you actually get 2 of them at a time when you craft them. So that is the food products, and I highly recommend. I got some chamomile here for the chamomile tea, but chamomile, beetroot, red peppers, some saffron if you want the spice tea that will give endurance instead of health regen. So that's another option that I like to grow. And quick little tip, saffron grows way faster for whatever reason right now. It's broken, I'm sure, on normal dirt, not the fertilized dirt. So I have this little tiny patch with a different type of dirt instead of fertilized like the rest of it. Then you're going to want corn on the cob and tomatoes, as well as honey. Quick tip for water. When you're done scooping up all the water, for those of you that don't know, one thing you can do is it basically gives you infinite water. You only need 1 well ever. Is you scoop up all that you can at any given point. Usually it recharges up to 3 times before it completely runs out. Then once it is all out, you just pick it up, go into your inventory, and then immediately throw it back down. And it acts like you just crafted it from scratch again, and you can instantly grab more water. So that's a little trick to get some extra water. Just grab everything you can, pick it up, put it right back down, and scoop it up some more. I do have 2 of them just so I can do that a little bit faster, but really you only need 1. Another little farming tip that you can do if you need fertilized soil to get some of those plants growing faster. I should just make a farming guide, honestly. But you can take your scrappy rake, and if you tilt it up at a 45-degree angle, you can actually push the farm up higher. And then all you got to do is take out your pickaxe and chop it back down. And so all you need is enough soil to create 1 square patch of it. And then using your rake, you can basically create infinite soil just by tilting the angle up and just ramping it up and picking it down. So now, as you can see, we've got 10 fertilized farm soil, which we can make more plots with. So that's how you get infinite water and infinite soil. Just quick little pro tips. But moving on. Last but not least, we have these skills, and then I'll show off the attributes once we pop all of our food items. But the most important thing, so right out the gate, I take Lumberjack to get to Miner. We're going to be doing a lot of mining for our twigs, our sulfur, and our iron ore. So I like to take that because it gives you a chance to get additional materials. In the Survivor tree, tick up the point in Endurance, followed by Runner and Double Jump for added mobility and maneuverability when you're in fights. Next, Quick Point in Endurance, followed by Wanderlust for less stamina consumption on roads, followed by Good Metabolism. This will give you 20% bonus to your potions, not just the orbs. We're not using orbs, but it is still good for potions. Followed by Rebound. This will give us 50% stamina regeneration buff. Then you want Sweet Tooth. This will be good for the yucca fruits, but if you're not using it, it's no biggie. We're just using that to get to the dessert stomach. pick up the point in dexterity, followed by dessert stomach. This is what gives us the 4 food slots instead of 3. Moving on to the ranger tree, I pick up the point in dexterity, followed by marksman and sharpshooter. This will give us 30 plus damage to our range damage. Then counter battery for 15% more damage to ranged enemies. Next, pick up skill shot to get 20% damage extra to the head of enemies with a bow, followed by multi-shot for a 20% chance to spawn multi-arrows, which will take bigger boss enemies down a little bit quicker and help you with AoE when you're inside the shroud, because we can't use shroud arrows in there. Followed by ranger. This will give +2 endurance and dexterity, as well as +5 stamina regen, critical chance, and critical damage. And then lastly, bee sting. I know a lot of people are against bee sting, but when you see the combat strategies and how I utilize this build, bee sting is a key perk in how we make this build work. If all we were doing was shooting line of sight arrows like iron arrows all the time, you wouldn't need this because you can just shoot one enemy at a time and that's basically it. But because the shroud arrow is actually an AoE cloud, it does an explosion, and sometimes you want to position that in the middle of a pack of enemies, and if you're shooting line of sight, it might not hit multiple enemies at once, whereas with this, we can double jump, hover in the air, position it perfectly right over top of a big group of enemies and hit multiple enemies at once. So it's actually really good for this build, and you'll see me use it constantly when I do the demo. Moving on, in the assassin's tree, I pick up dexterity, followed by airborne and updraft. So we have the infinite gliding. Next, pick up the quick point in endurance, followed by sniper, which gives us 10% critical hit chance with our ranged weapons. Next, pick up blessed arrows for 20% mana regen when you critically hit with a bow, and the extra point in dexterity. Lastly, pick up vitality surge for increased stamina with critical strikes with a ranged weapon, the quick point in dexterity, and then this is the big one. So I did the testing, and what shocked me was that shell shock actually works with shroud arrows, not just exploding arrows. And what this does is it infuses your ranged explosives with mana, and they now stun enemies for up to 1 second. It's actually going to be a longer than 1 second. It's like 3 or 4 seconds, believe it or not. And so you get the exact same effect as if you were using the explosive arrows, but you don't have to pay the crafting costs. So we're saving probably 15 points in the tree by not speccing into explosive arrows, but our shroud arrows are still going to stun everything, every arrow that we shoot. So no matter how hard the pack is, no matter how big the enemy is, even if you need to spam them one right after another, you will almost never get touched, because as you'll see in the combat demo, the enemies are just permanently stunned and stuck there in a cloud of shroud magic. And they just tick away, tick away, tick away as you're just spamming arrows over and over and over. And actually, we're going to be swapping between those 3 different bows. The other option you can do is actually whip out your melee weapon, because the enemies get stunned for so long that you can get 3 or 4 hits in before they wake up again, and you can regen health that way as well. So that's another option. So really, really good perk for this build is Shell Shock, believe it or not. That was a key game changer perk that I found out that makes the fights 10 times easier when you're using Shroud arrows. Moving on, in the Battle Mage tree, I pick up Intelligence and Arcane Deflection. This is kind of throwaway. I use it just to pick up Blink, because that'll help get us dashing around. And with all the stamina we've got, it helps out a lot. And basically we can do it infinitely. And then for our survivability, I pick up Evasion Attack and Battle Heal for when we're using our melee weapon to regenerate health. That will get super, super fast health regen with that weapon. And then the point in strength in the Barbarian tree for some added strength, because we had an extra point, 2 points in Constitution for more health, shiny plates and heavy plates for additional armor, followed by Constitution. And then lastly, Tower and Warden for bonus physical and magical resistance, another point in Constitution, and then finally Earth Aura for a flat permanent 10% damage reduction to you and all party members within 10 meters. So a nice little flat damage reduction there. So all in all, it's a great combination of skills, and as you'll see from the combat demo, it's actually a very, very effective combination when using Shroud arrows. The only downside to this build is those Shroud arrows don't work in the Shroud. So in those rare instances, you would just use your iron arrows, and with multi-shot, you're killing things just as fast anyway. So it doesn't really matter. It still works, but you'll see how quickly we take things down and how overpowered those Shroud arrows actually are. In comparison to the investment with explosive arrows. They're nearly as good with the stun effects and everything, but a tenth of the cost to craft. So saving a ton of points by speccing into that. So yeah, that is the skill tree. And again, if you want a copy of this, top line in the description will have links to the cheat sheets. So feel free to download that, and that'll have the build and all of the points in here that you can look at. But moving on, last but not least, I want to show off all of our attributes once we pop all of our food. So let's go ahead and do that. And with this build, our attributes are as follows. We're sitting at 13 Constitution and 11 Endurance, so a decent amount of health, plenty of stamina, and then 19 Dexterity, so our range damage is through the roof. We have 1130 health because of the armor and the perks that we've got in the tree for added defenses. 234 stamina, which doesn't seem like a lot, but because of the boots, we're getting a minus 700 delay, and our food items, we have more than enough stamina with that. And then we've got 107% bonus range damage. Critical damage and crit chance we can't really go by because it's not accurate right now in the attribute tree. They don't calculate it right for whatever reason, but ton of range damage with this build. So yeah, looking pretty good. Only thing left to do is to teleport to the battle arena and show off the build. I think you guys are going to be pretty impressed. Shroud arrows are a sleeper ammunition. I am telling you, just wait and see. But yeah, without any further ado, let me teleport over there to you guys and cut back to you here in a second. Alright, so here we are at the testing arena. Let's show off the build and show you how good it is. I'm going to put the headphones on this time just so I can see what's and hear what's coming to me. But yeah, you'll see how overpowered the Shroud arrows are. And you can literally, you make them so easily that you could spam only Shroud arrows on all these guys, but watch how good they work. It's burning guys down. So let's go and the quality of the arrows really shines when enemies start getting grouped up. And this is why that bite comes into play. To see how much they get stunned, you can just sit here and spam it, and they just infinitely get stunned. Then swap over to an iron arrow. Look at that. Instantly melted them. Yeah, okay, so we lost a little bit of health. Swap to our bow that does health regen. And the health regen actually ticks because of AoE damage as well. So you can see how much health we get back as well with this bow. Swap back, swap to a poison arrow. I hear a dog somewhere. Let's do this next loot. We took that top one out super quick. You guys saw how much harder it was with a warrior. Let's group all these guys up here. We'll take them all on at once. Get these guys all mad. This melts everything. And they're all stunned. Quickly switch. Get some fast health regen. And because everything is just permanently stunned, you like don't have to worry about anything. So, as you can see, it was like no problem at all to take those guys out. You basically get all the benefits of exploding arrows with pretty much a permanent stun on every enemy because it's an AoE damage-based arrow. It makes packs of enemies super, super easy to take care of. Like, we didn't get touched, like, barely at all. And when we did, you just whip out your Shadow Bane and get health regen, or stun them, and that stun lasts for like 3 seconds. You could just quickly whip out your weapon, get 3 or 4 hits in, and get your health back that way too. So that's another option. You got a solo guy, you can whip out your longbow. Where'd he go? Come up top and get one strong shot on this guy. Drop a guy down from afar, over 1,000 damage with that bow. So yeah, single targets, swap to your longbow. Normal fights, swap to your ignited bow. And then if you ever need health, swap to your Shadow Bane. And that's pretty much it. As you can see, super easy. The ammo, super easy to craft. And you basically get infinite stuns on enemies. Those brute guys are a piece of cake. They're usually super fast, but they're easy as hell when they're not moving. So you just sit there and spam those shroud arrows like constantly, and they just can't do anything to you. So yeah, that is the build, you guys. Very, very easy. Actually a nice breath of fresh air compared to the warrior and the wizard. I actually really enjoyed playing this. The shroud arrows ended up being way more fun and way easier to craft, and a lot better than I thought they would be. And that AoE stun on enemies is just overpowered in my opinion. So that is the build, you guys. If you enjoyed it, be sure to smash that like button, comment down below. I appreciate all of your guys' feedback. Don't forget to check out the cheat sheet in the description, links to the Discord in the description. Hopefully we see you guys around. But until the next one, hope everyone had a great day, and we'll see you all later.